The Supreme Court has struck down key Trump-era tariffs, reshaping American trade policy and ending a major era of economic nationalism. Markets surged, and international partners expressed cautious optimism. The ruling redefines executive power in trade, shifting authority back to Congress. The future of U.S. trade is now at a crossroads. The Trump-era tariffs were the culmination of a long-standing push for economic nationalism. Beginning in 2018, the administration imposed aggressive tariffs to reduce the U.S. trade deficit and protect American industries. Legal justifications included Section 232 for national security and Section 301 for unfair trade practices. The first major wave, 25% tariffs on steel and 10% on aluminum, affecting not just rivals, but close allies like Canada and the EU. Allies retaliated with tariffs on American goods, triggering a cycle of escalation and uncertainty for global supply chains. The policy marked a sharp break from decades of U.S. support for free trade. Focus soon shifted to China, with tariffs targeting billions in goods over intellectual property theft and forced technology transfers. China retaliated, hitting U.S. agricultural exports and escalating the trade war. The result? Disrupted global commerce and economic headwinds for both nations. Supporters argued the pain was worth it to fix a broken system and reshore jobs. Critics said tariffs were a blunt instrument, raising costs for American consumers and businesses without achieving strategic goals. The fundamental disagreement over tariffs set the stage for legal challenges. These disputes would ultimately reach the Supreme Court. The battle was about more than economics. It was about the limits of presidential power. The outcome would reshape the future of American trade. The legal fight against Trump-era tariffs was fierce, with industry groups and importers arguing the measures were an unconstitutional overreach. The central case, United States versus Global Steel Importers, focused on Section 232 tariffs for steel and aluminum. Plaintiffs claimed the national security rationale was a pretext for economic protectionism, a power reserved for Congress. Lower courts sided with the government, citing broad presidential authority in national security. The Supreme Court's decision to hear the case signaled its willingness to re-examine executive power in trade. Dozens of amicus briefs poured in from business groups, foreign governments, and legal scholars. The core question: did Section 232 give the president unlimited authority to define national security and impose tariffs, or were there constitutional limits? Plaintiffs argued the Commerce Clause gives Congress, not the president, the power to regulate foreign commerce. The government countered that the president has always held significant power in foreign policy and national security. The case was about the separation of powers at the heart of American government. The Supreme Court's answer would set a new precedent. During oral arguments, justices pressed both sides on constitutional limits. Plaintiffs argued that national security in Section 232 was too broad, giving the president a blank check to impose tariffs for any reason. This, they said, violated the non-delegation doctrine, which bars Congress from transferring its legislative powers without clear guidance. The government relied on historical precedent, arguing the president needs flexibility in foreign affairs and that economic security is part of national security. Some justices questioned whether the statute lacked a limiting principle, raising hypotheticals about unchecked presidential power. Others worried about the economic fallout of invalidating long-standing tariffs. The debate centered on whether national security was a sufficiently clear standard. The court had to balance executive authority with constitutional checks. The data tells a dramatic story. Before 2018, U.S. tariffs averaged 1.5%. After Trump-era tariffs, rates on Chinese imports soared above 19%, and the overall average more than doubled. Imports of steel, aluminum, and Chinese goods dropped sharply. But U.S. production didn't always rise. Importers often shifted sourcing to countries like Vietnam and Mexico. The U.S. trade deficit, a key target, didn't shrink. It grew. Retaliatory tariffs from other countries hit U.S. exports, especially agriculture. China slashed purchases of U.S. soybeans, causing financial distress for American farmers and prompting billions in federal aid. Other exports, from whiskey to motorcycles, faced new barriers in key markets. The tit-for-tat escalation disrupted global commerce and hurt exporters on all sides. The economic effects were uneven. Farm states like Iowa and Nebraska suffered, while steel-producing regions saw short-term gains but higher costs for manufacturers. The data reveals localized benefits but widespread costs. Trade diversion, not domestic revival, was the main result. The tariffs' impact was complex and far-reaching. The numbers show the limits of protectionism. The Supreme Court's decision comes against this backdrop. The Supreme Court's decision creates new winners and losers. Immediate beneficiaries: U.S. companies relying on imported goods, manufacturers, retailers, and tech firms will see lower costs and higher margins. Consumers are big winners, as prices for everyday products are expected to fall. The Congressional Budget Office estimated tariffs cost households hundreds per year. That burden is now lifted. Domestic steel and aluminum industries, once protected, now face renewed global competition and uncertainty. Industry leaders warn of job losses and seek new support from Congress. Internationally, U.S. trading partners like China, Canada, and the EU welcome the ruling, paving the way for normalized trade and removal of retaliatory duties. U.S. farmers and manufacturers regain access to key markets. Countries that benefited from trade diversion, like Vietnam and Mexico, may lose some new business. The landscape of winners and losers is shifting. The ruling resets the terms of global trade. The majority opinion, authored by the Chief Justice, focused on separation of powers. The court didn't ban tariffs for national security, but found the Trump-era measures lacked a clear limiting principle. Allowing national security to cover general economic competition would let the president regulate all foreign commerce, a power reserved for Congress. The court revived the non-delegation doctrine, ruling that Congress can't delegate legislative power without clear standards. The majority said Congress must be explicit if it wants to grant broad tariff authority. The issue now returns to Congress to reclaim or redefine its trade powers. A sharp dissent warned the ruling could weaken the nation's ability to respond to threats. The decision exposes deep divisions over the balance of power. The economic consequences of the ruling are already unfolding. Removing tariffs is expected to lower inflation and give the Federal Reserve more flexibility. Businesses gain clarity for long-term planning, likely spurring investment and hiring. Internationally, the decision is hailed as a win for the rules-based trading system and the World Trade Organization. U.S. allies welcome the ruling, hoping for renewed cooperation and the removal of retaliatory tariffs. The U.S. must now support domestic industries facing global competition, likely through targeted subsidies or new trade measures. The debate shifts from presidential power to Congress's role in industrial policy. The ruling forces a strategic rethink of how to address challenges from China, including intellectual property theft and state-sponsored industrial policy. The U.S. will need a more targeted, legally sound approach, working with allies and using WTO mechanisms. The era of broad tariffs as the main tool of statecraft is over. Congress must now craft a modern trade strategy. The global trading system enters a new phase. The U.S. faces both opportunity and challenge. The Supreme Court's decision is a watershed moment, invalidating a key Trump-era policy and reshaping the legal landscape of trade. The ruling curtails presidential power, returns authority to Congress, and signals a return to a more predictable, rules-based system. Consumers and importers benefit, but protected industries face new challenges. By reviving the non-delegation doctrine, the court sets stricter limits on executive power, impacting more than just trade. Congress must now take a more active role in setting trade policy. The ruling closes one chapter and opens another, but the core challenges, global competition and China's economic practices, remain. America stands at a crossroads, compelled to forge a new consensus for the 21st century global economy. As the nation moves beyond trade wars, the question is, what should America's trade doctrine be? The answer will shape prosperity and security for years to come.